of background check bills that I think go too far, but I'm willing to have a conversation with my Democratic colleagues about how we can make sure that people who are a danger to themselves or others, that we deal with that issue in terms of having a gun. I am willing to expand background checks in a common sense way. One of the ideas I have originated from a case in South Carolina. Bolin was a woman with mental health problems that was convicted in court. She actually pled not guilty, Alan, by reason of insanity to shoot people at Ashley Hall. She had been convicted in federal court of threatening President Bush. She was sent to a mental health treatment facility. She was released, and that adjudication was not in the background system. So I have legislation to make sure that over 1 million adjudications at the state level where people have been declared a danger to themselves or others after having gone through due process, that these are enrolled in the background system so we won't miss an Alice Bolin. After being released from the facility, she went to Allendale, I think it was, and bought a gun, and there was no record of her mental health problems. She took that weapon, went to Ashley Hall, tried to kill some people there, and the gun misfired. Thank God it did. The point is, Democrats are basically declaring war on gun ownership. Like most South Carolinians, I've grown up around guns. I went hunting as a young man with my father and all of his friends. I enjoy hunting very much to this day. So with gun ownership comes responsibility. We all need to be good stewards when it comes to owning a gun, make sure children can't have access to weapons, and using a weapon responsibly. But my Democratic colleagues are pushing, I think, the most radical agenda regarding the Second Amendment in our lifetime. The Democratic House is in the hands of the most radically liberal people in the country, and Chuck Schumer has said that we're going to have debates on the floor of the United States Senate about guns. I welcome that debate. I think it's a debate we need to have. There's legislation being pushed by President Biden to ban assault weapons. We've been down that road before. In 1994, there was an assault weapon ban. The evidence indicates that there was really no change at all in crime because the crooks are going to get a gun. There are 20 million semi-automatic assault-type weapons owned by Americans today. There's an effort by President Biden to ban these weapons. I have an AR-15. The AR-15 I purchased was part of a number of us in my reserve unit in Afghanistan. Attorney General Wilson was deployed. Rock. He got a combat infantry badge, so we understand combat zones and we understand weapons. I bought an AR-15 with the seal of my reserve unit as a token of my time in service. But one of the reasons that people buy guns is not only to enjoy shooting and hunting, but to defend themselves. According to the Pew Research Center, 67% of gun owners cite self-protection as a major reason why they own a gun. A lot of liberals kind of laugh at this and mock those of us who think guns can be used for self-defense. Well, let me tell you, you don't have to look very far and you don't have to look very long to understand the reality of the situation. We've had in South Carolina this year alone, in February, January, 3 episodes where people used a gun to defend themselves when their home was broken into. At an 80-year-old plus veteran in Aiken, South Carolina, his house was broken into, his wife was being stabbed, he shot the intruder. In Iowa, we had a home break-in where the homeowner shot the intruder. We had a barber shop in Columbia that was trying to be robbed, and one of the barbers had a lawfully owned gun and was able to stop the robbery. During the riots in Charleston, as the looters and rioters were going down the streets of Charleston, you had an employee at Hall's Chop House go out and fire a gun up in the air to protect his fellow employees and the patrons of the Chop House. They estimate hundreds of thousands of times a year people use a firearm to protect themselves and their family, particularly women. Here's what Joe Biden said when he was vice president. He said, "I told Jill," his wife, our lovely first lady now, "if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here, walk out and put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside," Biden said. You don't need an AR-15. It's harder to aim. It's harder to use. In fact, you don't need 30 rounds to protect yourself. Buy a shotgun, buy a shotgun. So this is Joe Biden's advice to his wife in Delaware. If you ever find yourself in a bad spot, take the double barrel, go out on the porch, and fire it. Well, that's one way of doing it. Some people may like that option. But here's the good news. Vice President Biden understood there may be a time when you need a gun to defend yourself. And he recommended the shotgun. So that's the Joe Biden way. You don't need an AR-15. My advice is that you need to consider multiple options. There's an effort to ban semi-automatic so-called assault weapons, 20 million out there. There's an effort to mandatorily buy them back. Beto O'Rourke has a bill in the House that would require you to sell your AR-15 back to the government, confiscating your weapon, but they'll pay you for it, but you have no choice. It's a forced sale. The people in charge of the Democratic Party are about as radical as we've ever seen when it comes to gun ownership. Now, I'm here to tell people, Palmetto Armory, you're in a lawful business, I've got your back. I'm here to tell every gun owner that I've got your back. You just need to do your part. Now, why would anybody need to own an AR-15? If there is a breakdown of law and order, and that can happen. We've seen it happen in our major cities. Remember Hugo, where people were isolated for days? Remember Katrina? It's not impossible to find yourself in the modern world without any police protection, because that's just the way the times are in which we live in. We're talking about defunding the police. So there's a lot of options available to you if you find yourself in a bad situation. One's a cell phone. Good luck with that. You may not be able to have service. The other is the Biden approach, which is a double-barrel shotgun. My approach is to have multiple options. The AR-15. Now, I enjoy shooting the gun because I was in the military. But if any family finds themselves in peril, what home do you think people are going to last? I think the home they go to first is the one with a cell phone, probably next the shotgun, but this will be the last. And here's a pistol, some middle ground. There's an effort to ban the number of bullets you can put in a magazine. Well, that won't work because the criminals won't agree to that term. All the crooks are going to get as many bullets and many weapons as they can find. And if you ever find yourself in a bad spot, does it make sense to unilaterally disarm? One of the most chilling stories is from our neighbors over in Georgia. There was a situation outside of Atlanta where a woman was at home with her daughters. Someone broke into the house and she ran to the closet, got on the phone to her husband, I think it's the Harmon family, and was calling about what to do. The husband said, "Get in the closet, there's a pistol. If he opens the closet, shoot him." That's exactly what happened. The intruder found the woman at home with her daughter in the closet. She pulled out a revolver, shot him 6 times, hit him 5, and he was still able to get away. What if there had been more than one? Do you really care whether or not that homeowner had more than 15 rounds? I don't. One bullet in the hands of a criminal is one too many. A gun in the hands of somebody not compromised is a bad situation. A gun in the hand of a lawful gun owner is a constitutional right that we're here to protect. So to those who make fun of the idea of self-defense, just remember what Joe told us when he was vice president. Go out on the porch and shoot a shotgun, they'll go away. Here's my advice. You only get 2 shots. Make sure that you use them wisely. Every day in America, people use a weapon to defend their business and their family. Thousands of times each year. And I'm here to tell you that I'll work with Democrats for common sense gun reform, but I will not sign up for the most radical agenda in American history, which is eliminating Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens and hoping the criminal will follow. Now, in this state, we're fortunate to have an attorney general who not only has the back of the cops, but the average, everyday citizen, business person, homeowner, renter, you name it. And I'm going to now turn it over to Alan, and he can tell you from a law enforcement perspective and from a self-defense perspective why lawful gun ownership matters to South Carolinians. Yeah.
Senator Graham, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue, and thank you for being here today and promoting this business. This started off as a small business, and I know the owners very well, and I know they appreciate it. First, I want to say this. I agree with you working in a bipartisan fashion to address issues as it relates to protecting the general public from people who would buy a firearm who might be mentally ill. I was involved in the Ashley Hall bill. As the Attorney General, I worked with Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature to help close the Charleston loophole, as Senator Graham discussed just a moment ago. That was a really important bipartisan bill that addressed mental health, because guns don't kill people. Mentally ill people or evil people with guns kill people. And that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that not every Democrat out there I'm going to put into the same category as being extremists on this issue, because I work with Democrats in the state level. But the same people in Washington, D.C. who want to defund the police and have encouraged local municipalities across the country to defund the police, they also want to take away your right to protect yourself. Now, they claim it's only for weapons of war. I've had conversations with my friends on the left, and they talk about weapons of war. It's black, shiny guns that look scary. What is a reasonable gun restriction? What is a weapon of war? What is an assault weapon? Sometimes I don't even think they know what it is they're talking about. When I was raising younger children, when my kids were toddlers and younger, I used to read a book to them called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And the whole book is, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. If you give him a glass of milk, he's going to keep wanting and wanting and wanting. That's what this is all about. It's all about, well, we want this particular gun reform, we want that particular gun reform, and it's a slow, steady walk back, and it's small encroachments that add up over time. And I'm very concerned, because if you go back to what I recall the Columbine massacre over 20 years ago, back in the late 90s, there were over 20 laws that were violated. The kind of people who would kill you with a firearm are not the kind of people who are going to abide by these gun laws. If you want to close loopholes, if you want to address mental health, if you want to address criminal justice and letting people out on the streets who would get firearms and use them, then we can have that conversation. If you do want to talk about those things that Senator Graham said, I'm all ears, just like I was with the Ashley Hall. But when it comes to defending the Second Amendment, people's constitutional right, their right to keep and bear arms, which the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed upon. which presupposes that that right doesn't come from government, it pre-existed government, and we will defend that in the courts if necessary. Senator Graham, thank you for allowing me to stand up here with you today to defend the Second Amendment and to protect our citizens. So I appreciate you having me here today.
Thank you. And one final thought as to what the Senate should do. Bring up the House bills. Let's have a debate. If you really want to ban assault weapons, bring up the bill and let's have the debate. The reason Senator Schumer won't bring up the so-called assault weapons ban, which is a misnomer, is because it won't pass. It won't get 50 votes, much less 60. And the reason he won't do this is because it would expose that most Americans are not where the radical left is at. And you've got to understand where the Democratic Party is headed on this issue. It's one thing to ban an AR-15. It's another thing to require the 20 million of us who have one to be forced to sell it back to the government. There's legislation introduced that I think would get the vast majority of Democrats a mandatory buyback. You talk about a slippery slope. So I want everybody in South Carolina to understand we live in very dangerous times legislatively. We live in very dangerous times. Look at what's going on in the major cities in the country. Look what happened in Charleston. Look what's happened to the police, trying to defund the police. So all I can tell you is that I've been around for a while. I've never been more worried about an attack on the Second Amendment than I am right now. But I'm here to tell you that we're going to prevail because America is not going to give in to the radical element in this country trying to reform and change who we are. And one of the things about our Constitution is that we understood early on that if you live in a dictatorship or in places where the government runs everything, the first thing they take away from you is not just your speech, but your ability to defend yourself. That's why the Second Amendment exists. The ability to own a gun responsibly is a constitutional right in America. And here's what I would say. We need that right today as much as any other time in American history. Thank you.
Senator Graham, which parts of the background check bill that you mentioned you think go too far? Which parts go too far?
The ones that I think deal with private sales. We can do something with gun show loopholes, I think. But if you transfer a weapon to a family member, I'm not really sure how that is affected in the House bill. So I'll look at it. I know that the Senator Schumer is talking about bringing an assault weapons ban. That President Biden is pushing that idea. Again, bring them all to the floor. Let's vote. Maybe we can find some compromise. But I want to put every United States senator on the record as to whether they stand on the Second Amendment. I think the voters in 2022 need to understand this.
Some have criticized your comments you made on TV recently about owning a gun and using it to protect yourself from gangs in the event of a natural disaster.
Yeah.
Some people are criticizing that as fear-mongering. What's your response to that?
Well, Joe Biden told Jill, if you find yourself in a bad spot, take the shotgun and scare people away. We live in a world where law and order is breaking down way too often. Those of us in South Carolina can remember natural disasters. Literally, the police can't get to you if there's a hurricane or some natural disaster like they could, like in Seneca, we had a tornado. Now, power lines were down. I couldn't get out of my neighborhood for a whole day. The bottom line is self-defense is one of the fundamental rights associated with the Second Amendment. Most people in South Carolina who buy a gun would tell you that one of the reasons they have a weapon is for self-defense purposes. The guy at the chop house, Hall's Chop House, used the gun to scare away a crowd that was going to ransack the business. The people who are denying this are the ones who want to take your guns. They're the people who, more times than not, have people with guns around them protecting them. It's the liberal elite who are able to live in a security environment the average person can't have. All the people talking about taking your guns away have armed guards around them. So I'm here to tell you, look in South Carolina this year, where 3 people, senior citizens mostly, if had not had a gun, they'd have been killed. Women would be raped, and people would be killed time and time again without the ability to defend themselves. This is not fear-mongering. This actually happens. We've had 3 instances in South Carolina already this year where a person used a weapon to defend their family from a home intruder. Go look at the analysis of this in terms of the number of times every year people use a gun in self-defense. And you'll find out it's astonishingly high, more than I ever thought. So that's my answer. Thank you all.